Mike Tomlin says he's excited to not have Ben Roethlisberger. Wait a minute. There's some real context to what he meant by being excited about the anxiety of not having Ben Roethlisberger. He's always excited for a challenge. We'll talk about that, who should be CB1, and a lot more right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Today, we got Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus episodes when we have breaking news content and so on and so forth. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Joining today is Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, what's up?
Chris, how are you? I love being here with you on a Friday.
I'm the same. I love Fridays. It's the end of the week. It's time to chill. The Steelers made some headways this week. They signed Larry Ogunjobi. There was a lot of talk about what's going on. Mike Tomlin went on a podcast. I briefly have talked about that in my other episodes because we were so focused on the impact of the Larry Ogunjobi signing, what it does for the defensive line, the linebackers, the defense as a whole, the roster as a whole. You can check the last two episodes for that. I want to focus with you, Jenna, today about a specific aspect of Mike Tomlin's interview on the Pivot podcast. Now, if you haven't watched this, I suggest you stop this video right now, go to the Pivot podcast, check them out, see what they're doing. They had an hour-and-a-half talk between Ryan Clark, former Steelers safety, Fred Taylor, former Jaguars running back. He also played for the Patriots for a little bit, and Channing Crowder, former NFL linebacker. The three of them just sat in Tomlin's base and talked for an hour and a half, and it was phenomenal. Great conversation. Learned a lot about it. It was generally like you and I were watching this and like texting each other like, oh my goodness, like this is amazing. We don't get Tomlin like this ever.
No, leave it to Ryan Clark to get Mike Tomlin in that kind of give that color and just kind of get some insight, because when we talk with him, as he should be, he's,
his guard's up.
Yeah, a little bit, as it should be. Again, as a head coach, you don't want to, you're not going to say the wrong thing. You don't want to reveal anything. And, but having this, introspective look at Mike Tomlin was really, really cool. And what an amazing conversation. There was so much talked about, as you just alluded to, but it was just one of those, those moments where you're like, this is amazing to sit here and listen to.
I agree. It was amazing to listen to. Now, I want to look at a specific part of this conversation, because this got me when Mike Tomlin was asked about not having Ben Roethlisberger. First, Mike Tomlin acknowledged, hey, Ben's a great player. He's done all these things for us. We were to lean on him. But then he started talking about, he said, and this is a quote, he said, I'm looking forward to the anxiety associated with that uncertainty, the uncertainty of not having Ben Roethlisberger, and with having to stand and deliver to live out what we believe in. The standard is the standard. And he went on to talk about how he lives in discomfort. He doesn't like to be comfortable, because when he's comfortable, he's not working harder to be better. And that is, to me, is very interesting. He also called it, he said this, he's like, all this being said, he said it's scary but exciting, about who might replace Ben Roethlisberger, but how they adapt without him. He also talked about how the Steelers, there's a redistribution of money, which means there needs to be a redistribution of playmaking. And all this points to me, Jenna, is that Mike Tomlin is aware the Steelers have to do a lot to make up for Ben Roethlisberger, but he sounds very confident that they have the talent and the potential to be able to not only make up for it, but find ways to win in different ways that make you think like, wow, wait a second. Did they need that all along? Because now they're winning with their defense, their run game, whatever other ways, but they're making it happen.
No, absolutely. And we knew the uncertainty coming into the season. We've talked about it over and over about how this is kind of a new chapter for this franchise. They don't have Ben Roethlisberger, Kevin Colbert, no longer the general manager of this team. It is kind of a big turning of the page, but we hear Mike Tomlin all the time talk about how he loves staring in the face of adversity and he loves going to battle and those types of things. every day. And that's exactly, again, him being his true authentic self here. But I think that's exactly what it is. He's like, I'm acknowledging the fact that we don't know what's going to come. We don't know how this team is going to look, but there's confidence that the pieces are there. And there's confidence too that in that quarterback's room right now, they at least have guys that are going to help the team get to a good solid point. We talked about this too. Is this going to be a team that goes out and, dazzles and, cakewalks their way to the Super Bowl? I don't think anybody's predicting that. And if you are, I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. But he's excited about the possibilities of what this team is going to be capable of. And it might not be this season. It might not be immediate, but in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons down the road, when you see a lot of these guys continue to grow, and he's excited to do that growing with them. I think that's a big part of this too.
I agree too. The whole excitement here isn't just the challenges, that he is excited to see a lot of his players grow in this adversity, in knowing, hey, there's not some franchise quarterback behind me who's just going to save our butts when we mess up, right? Like, he's just going to be able to throw it over the defense and figure it out, and we'll get there. That I think that's what Tomlin's truly excited about, is he's going to get a chance to really test guys, put the game on their shoulders, and see how they respond. And it also signals to me that they have a lot of guys that they feel like, hey, you could be those guys. We're going to talk about their leadership in the second segment. But I really think that when I look at how the Steelers are organized right now, you see them sign James Daniels. You see them sign Myles Jack to the linebackers. You see them go and get a Larry Ogunjobi. These were moves that probably wouldn't have happened in recent years with Ben Roethlisberger and how expensive the offense was in past years. Now you're adding these guys in across the board to solidify your roster. And you're able to re-sign Minkah Fitzpatrick to a long-term deal while you have TJ Watt on the most expensive edge rusher deal in the NFL. You have all those things going for you right now. And I think Tomlin's point is, hey, we've won for a lot of years because Ben Roethlisberger's been back there and he's been the one just heaving the ball. Now we still gonna, he's talked about how, like, hey, the quarterback expectations don't lessen. It's not that. It's just that now, because we're not paying the quarterback spot that much money, we now expect the ways that we win to come more so from other parts of this roster.
Yeah, and you knew what you had in Ben Roethlisberger. You knew that there were games where if you were down and everything else was going wrong, he would right the ship and he would pull out this gutsy, incredible late, game-winning fourth quarter drive. That's what you knew to expect. And I think what Tomlin's getting at here too is like, we're going to find that in different avenues. Maybe it's going to be, TJ Watt, the opposing team is driving down the field looking for the game-winning score, and TJ Watt makes a strip, a strip sack, or, we see Minkah Fitzpatrick come up with a huge interception. I think he's excited about seeing the different ways this team is going to win and they're going to find victories, and the different ways that they're all going to go through adversity together. I mean, we talk about too all the time, and we hear coaches preach this left and right, how, you have to get out of your comfort zone in order to really grow, in order to see who you are, see what you're made of, and in order to thrive. And I think him also saying this too is a little bit, if he's saying it on this podcast, he's also probably saying this to his guys.
He is.
Oh yeah, 100. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that there. So for him to kind of be posing this challenge where it's like, hey, I'm asking all of you to step up because so many people know what this franchise has been for the last 18 years. It's still going to have that. His standard is still going to be the standard. Mm-hmm. How are all of you going to prove that?
I agree. That's a big part of it. Part of proving that is not just on the field, it's off the field in the locker room and being leaders on this team. We'll talk about that leadership component because he's talked about a side project that he's been working on to improve, to develop those leaders. We'll talk about those guys in just a second. But first, I got to talk to you guys about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's Stanley Cup Finals, which are well underway. Game 4 was lit Wednesday night. Jenna, that was another overtime. Okay, wait. Jenna, in your opinion, were the Avalanche offside or no?
No.
They were. Whoa, she goes with the okay.
Nope.
Okay.
There were not 6 men on the ice. There were not 6 men. That's how hockey, I will go on and on. That's how hockey works. It was a change. The player on the bench has 4 seconds to basically say, I could go on and on and on, but that's a change. And if you rewind the video like 5 frames prior, there's a 6th man from Tampa. So I think everybody just needs to tone it down. But yeah, this is fun.
Point being, Tampa Bay needs to suck it up. But point being, if you want to make money on that, the best way to do that is betonline.net. You got the Stanley Cup Finals and Major League Baseball well underway. Make your money and learn how to make money at betonline.net. That gives you all the great odds on playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner. We're talking Steelers football, of course. Now, Jenna, the leadership component is the part that I was alluding to in the last segment here. And Mike Tomlin addressed that as well in the Pivot podcast. He talked about a side project, and he said, right now, a little side project that I'm on is fostering the growth and development of leadership. He said, I'm bridging the transitional leadership relationship. That's a lot of words. Transitional leadership relationship. That's how you know Mike Tomlin. He'd be a wordsmith sometimes with his Tomlin. But he talked about, he's like, I'm developing that between Cam Heyward and Najee Harris. He said Najee's not just a leader, but a born leader. He said he's got good football morals, sees the game the way we see the game, and wants to be a part of what's right. So that needs to be cultivated and needs to be trained. He also talked about the importance of getting more of that out there and trying to see more of that to the team's future. He talked about him being a bell cow. But to me, this is another part of Ben Roethlisberger being gone. Ben Roethlisberger was the face. Whenever the Steelers were shown, whenever they were talking about, you talk about the Steelers on primetime football for the past 15 years, Ben Roethlisberger was the face that they showed oftentimes on the marker and on the marquee. And when they're showing, Steelers versus Ravens or Steelers versus Patriots and all that. Now he can't be part of that. He's not part of their face, but part of that is also the leadership component. Who sets the tone at practice? Who is the person that says, hey, we have to meet this level? Cam Heyward is that right now.
Yeah.
But the Steelers don't have too many of the guys that are star players in their 30s right now. They have Tyson Lulu at 35, but he's a role player. They're looking at TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, those guys to step up, but they needed other guys, and especially someone on the offensive side. I just think it's really interesting to see the investment they're making to make Najee Harris become a leader.
Yep. No, absolutely. And when we talked with Najee at minicamp a couple weeks ago, he was kind of saying, yeah, I do need to be a little bit more of a leader. And, he kind of is vocal. It's so funny because Najee to me is very vocal, but he even admitted this. He's a lead by example kind of guy. So it said, I need to be a little bit more of both and kind of take that. And of course, having a guy like Cam Heyward be that mentor in the sense of, hey, I lead this way. Maybe you can take some bits and pieces from here. But they do need a guy like that on the offense because, again, Ben Roethlisberger with his departure, who is going to fill that gap? And they know that Najee is going to be here for the foreseeable future. They know his level of talent, what he brings. And I think we saw part of it in minicamp too. I keep going back, him and Devin Bush. Najee's like running Devin Bush through footwork drills. Mm-hmm. Those types of things. So seeing those little things, it does give a lot of optimism for where this franchise can go. But then you look at Najee Harris, it's like, oh my God, he is, it's his second year. It's his sophomore season here. But having Mike Tomlin as a leader too, I think kind of people sometimes tend to overlook that a little bit. He is probably one of the most phenomenal, in my opinion, leaders as a head coach for what he does and how he works with these guys. So for him to say, I see what Cam Heyward does, but I also kind of want the two of them to work together so he can kind of say, hey, again, we go back to the standard is the standard, but this is how you need to be a leader on this team. This is how we hope that you can be. You can adjust to it based on your own style, but that's a big thing too. And with Minkah Fitzpatrick as well, that was something he talked about in his press conference after he signed his new contract too, how he wants to take a little bit more of a bigger role. I think you kind of see these guys doing it automatically. Mm-hmm. But obviously too, with Mike Tomlin kind of, maybe he's just giving him a little gentle nudge in that direction. But I mean, that is going to be a huge thing for this team is who are those next wave of leaders going to be and how is that leadership going to be fostered?
Right. And a part of it is also, not just being vocal or being the loud guy in the huddle, but the person who sets the tone at practice, the person who everyone looks to and says, I'm going to follow that guy into battle. Cam Heyward's locker is next to Kenny Pickett's because they want him to also pass that on to Kenny Pickett as a future leader of the team. There is a big investment by the Steelers right now to find those leaders, and not just to find, but to cultivate those leaders, as you said, because they want to build these people, because they need these guys to step up into those roles as the years come on. Now, again, this year, you're probably looking at Cam Heyward, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick. Those are your leaders. And then you have like role players that you're expecting from, Cam Sutton in the secondary. He's been around long enough. The offensive line, even though this guy's a new face, a lot of the offensive line talks about James Daniels being a leader for them as a group. But you need Najee Harris. You need Pat Freiermuth. And you're going to need also Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, whoever does start at quarterback, to take on a sort of leadership type of role. Maybe not the face of the team, maybe not the top leader of the team, but a guy who could set everyone straight and be like, hey, this is what we're doing today. Let's go out there and execute this properly. There's so many things that I think that Mike Tomlin has a reason to be excited about when it comes to this, because the Steelers have invested in a lot of young talent that has a lot of upside both on the field and off the field as potential leaders and good guys that people want to follow. And when you combine those two, you have a lot of potential to take on that leadership platform and to bring forward what the Steelers want to see. So it's like, hey, Mike Tomlin don't have to address everybody because he has people around. And that was something that the 2008-2009 Super Bowl championship team that the Steelers had, was that, James Ferrier, Ike Taylor, James Harrison, Casey Hampton, just down the line. They had Hines Ward, Troy Polamalu, Ryan Clark, all these guys. And Ben Roethlisberger was crazy enough, one of the younger guys on that team. But the way that was constructed leadership-wise, Mike Tomlin, you didn't have to put as many checks in on the team. But now you kind of have to cultivate it so you can get back to that. And I think that's a big reason why Mike Tomlin is so focused on these quote-unquote side projects.
No, absolutely. And to look at how young this team, especially how young this offense is, we keep talking about that too. But to get this going now, to have these guys look at Najee Harris as maybe not the leader at the moment, but a big piece of that leadership group in the next handful of years, cultivating that early will not only foster it among all of the young guys too, but you'll kind of just see this again, setting the standard as the standard. Hey, this is how we do things. This is how it goes here. And for some of those, third, fourth, fifth year guys that aren't entirely considered veterans yet, to kind of see that, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I want to they already do, but I want to follow this guy into battle that much more because of all of what he does, both with his talent and with how he leads us as, a group of men.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to take a break from the leadership discussion. When we come back, I have a question from one of our listeners, one of our viewers who called into our hotline with a question about the cornerback position and one that pertains to Jenna's expertise. We're going to address that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Don't go anywhere. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner. We're talking Steelers football, and we're going to address the cornerback position. And that's one that I've addressed a lot since the end of the season. I've said for a long time they need to find their CB1. I thought during the offseason that they would either sign a cornerback or draft a cornerback who would definitely be CB1 material, trade for somebody that you'd see, oh, yeah, like maybe not Jalen Ramsey, but someone on the line that's like, okay, Ahkello Witherspoon, Cam Sutton, you two are fighting for the CB2 role. But they signed Levi Wallace. And now you have a situation where you have a lot of guys around the same time of their career. Cam Sutton, Levi Wallace, Ahkello Witherspoon, all guys with like 5 or 6 years of experience or so that are in the NFL and looking to prove that they are CB1 types of guys. Jenna, this question came from Terry Davis of Pittsburgh about the cornerback situation and what the Steelers need to do. Here's Terry.
Hey, Chris, Terry Davis from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I just have a question. Now that they signed Minka, and you really don't see a true number one corner, do you think it's a good idea for the Steelers to lock another corner in or beef up the D-line? Or go offense because we're the cheapest offense, and they're saying we ain't going to do much with it. Just like your thoughts on that, and I love the show.
Well, thank you, Terry, for your question. As always, if you want to get in touch with the Locked On Steelers podcast, leave a voicemail just like Terry did. Call 412-223-6644 or email LOSteelersTopicBag@gmail.com with your voicemail attached. Just be sure to leave your name, where you're from, and keep your message under a minute or so that we can keep the show rolling. But, Jenna, Terry has a few things. One, he talked about offense. He asked about defensive line. Obviously, they addressed it with Larry Ogunjobi. I talked yesterday with Doran Dickerson about addressing the backup running back. But is the CB1 already on this roster? You had experience covering Levi Wallace with your time covering the Buffalo Bills. Is Levi Wallace CB1? Is Ahkello Witherspoon? Cam Sutton? Or do the Steelers legitimately need to go get somebody else right now?
Well, this is what's so intriguing to me because I just think about all three of the guys that they have on the roster right now and the versatility that they have. I think the big thing is I do believe Levi Wallace has the potential. I really do, especially last season. Obviously, I was here covering the Steelers, but when Tre'Davious White went down for the Bills, Wallace had to step up in that role as the CB1. And he, for the most part, I think he played very solidly for the Bills. There were some games, that he was exposed a little bit more against really top offenses, as in the Bucs and the Chiefs. But I look at so many of like the dominant CB1s in this league, and you look at guys like Tre'Davious White, like Jalen Ramsey, and they're not few and far between in that way, but I feel like there's such like a elite level, and then there's a little bit of a gap. Mm-hmm. And not to say that some of you guys can't bridge that and can't be like a really solidly above average. I will make plays. I'm going to get in your face. I'm going to match up against your top guy, and he's not going to have himself an absolute field day and get you 1 million fantasy points if you have him on your roster. And I do think Levi Wallace has the potential to show that. I think one of the most interesting things too is something that we asked him during mini camp was, I asked him kind of about the culture of the Steelers and how it differed from Buffalo. And he gave me kind of the answer I knew I was going to get a little bit, but I was like, oh, okay, you're going to say this. He's like, yeah, it's pretty much the same. He knows what this defense expects of him. He knows how to come in, how to work hard, how to perform. And I think he can absolutely perform at a very, very high level. Again, is he going to be that elite Tre'Davious White, Jalen Ramsey guy? No, but is there going to be a massive drop-off? I don't think so either. And I think once he gets 100% up to speed, which he said during minicamp, how pretty much close he was and how easy it was to kind of adapt to this defense, I really do think he can thrive here. And this is kind of a good situation for him. It did seem like he priced himself out of Buffalo a little bit because, again, he's like, hey, I am definitely better than a CB2 here. I can be your number one guy, but I think there's still a little bit more of like, I need the full opportunity to show you that I can prove it. And I think he will do that here. I really think that there will be a lot of success. I also do love the relationship that him and Minkah Fitzpatrick have because I completely forgot until I was like, oh my gosh, of course, when we were talking with them, they knew each other from Alabama. They have that relationship. And again, we talked about leadership, going back to the leadership Minkah Fitzpatrick showed, but I think we hear all the time also iron sharpens iron. These two guys are going to just kind of, I feel like some of the battles that we're going to see during training camp are going to be phenomenal, but I think you're going to see them both want to elevate each other's games that much more. And when you're joining a defense that has TJ Watt and has Minkah Fitzpatrick, and you're put in that court in CB1 role, hey, I'm going to show you that like you guys got it locked down up front. You have it in the, middle field, backfield. I'm going to be that guy that's, we're playing whatever team, their top receiver, they're not going to get the ball. I'm going to do everything they can to not get the ball or to not allow them to get the ball.
No, I get entirely what you're saying. And here's the thing that I have about this, because a lot of people are saying they should go get somebody. Now, if the Steelers trade for a cornerback, that's one situation. Yeah. But if you look at the cornerback market right now of guys remaining in free agency, a lot of these guys are older guys who kind of were out of their prime, the Xavier Rhodeses, the Richard Shermans, the Joe Hayden is a part of that list. I don't count those guys in the conversation, but a guy like Kevin King, he's 27 years old, coming off his year with the Packers. Maybe a guy like that fits. Maybe you're looking at a guy that age. Maybe you look at Trey Waynes at 30 years old. But if you get one of those guys, Jenna, you're not replacing your CB1. These are guys that would be kind of in the mix with these other guys. There's not a definitive CB1, and that's what makes me think the Steelers' best move at cornerback right now might be to wait until they see these guys in camp, and if there's an emergency, okay, go make a move then. But they may just want to say, hey, you know what? Let's see what Ahkello and Levi and Cameron all have to offer, and who is the CB1 amongst them, and if that's enough for what we want our defense to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because people have been asking, like, is there going to be like a battle, quote unquote? And I don't think there is, because I think all of these guys bring that versatile skill set. I mean, we hear all the time, everybody talks about Cam Sutton being this, Swiss Army knife on the defense. But I think that it is so fascinating to just kind of see how this is going to play out at training camp and who is going to win that job. And I don't think it's also going to be solidified throughout the entire season too. I think a lot of these guys have a very large ceiling to be able to say, hey, we have the potential to be this, elite defense in that way. And to kind of, we're going to be locked down. We're not going to allow, I'm kind of rambling a little bit of a sense.
You're fine. No, I get your point.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a defense, if you're talking about being locked down, if you're talking about corners, you want to trust that your guys are going to be those guys.
Exactly.
You want to trust that hey, Ahkello, like one of these guys are going to be it. I just look at this team, and with the cap space that they still have available, also it was announced that Larry Ogunjobi's cap space is $8 million with incentives. So like, the Steelers got him at a very good discount from his $13 million a year that he would have been paid with the Chicago Bears. So with all of that, that the Steelers probably have, and I said it would be around $7 or $8 million whenever they sign him to a 1-year deal. You're looking at least $15 million in cap space left around from the Steelers right now. And if it's around that $15 million, you still got money to go get, trade for and take on a cap hit of, $10 million or $11 million. And those are good veterans that you can price yourselves into there. But again, if you don't have to do it at cornerback, if these guys look like a solid unit, you can spend that money on the offensive line, like Terry suggested. You can go around. Maybe you say, hey, we need another backup linebacker, a backup running back, like I talked with Doran Dickerson yesterday. So I look at this and I see as a big opportunity for the Steelers to still make a move. I'm all for it. If they go get a CB1, if they trade for a guy who's a top cornerback in the league, go for it. Get your guy. But I'm not so sure it's all that necessary right now. Mm-hmm. They need to wait to see how things play out in training camp, not just with themselves, but see how desperate another team gets for another position. Maybe a cornerback gets released. That's how they've gotten to Joe Hayden. When the Browns released him. Wait for your opportunity. Don't rush into trying to sign a big name cornerback.
Yeah, I don't think there's this immediate need to be like, oh, we have to fill a giant gap here. I think there's a lot of potential among these guys, and they're going to have to show it. That's going to be the other thing too, is they're going to be like, hey, we're going to kind of see which one of us does come out on top, but also, how we all as one unit are going to make this defense better, because at the end of the day, that's the goal.
Absolutely. That's a huge part of the goal there. And again, this all goes back to Mike Tomlin's goal of you're not replacing this Ben Roethlisberger necessarily at the quarterback position, but replacing the lack of talent that he brought at one position with more talent at several other positions, the redistribution of playmaking that Mike Tomlin was talking about. That's where we're at today. That's where we're going to finish today on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us. You're a pleasure every time you're on this show. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Well, Chris, it is always a pleasure to be here. So thank you for always having me. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner 11, Instagram, Jenna_Harner, and on WPXI channel 11 here in Pittsburgh. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. It's kind of that, Pirates are going on, but there's a little more free time for us to kind of tell some stories. So we've been doing some cool feature stories. Definitely check those out on my Twitter page and online.
Absolutely. Do check Jenna out, especially with all the stuff they're doing at Channel 11. They do amazing work at Channel 11. Love everything that they got going on there. And hey, sometimes you check me out, I'll be on the final word. So that's another way to check it out. Again, I'm Chris Carter. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can find this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you watch this video on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all our daily Monday through Friday episodes. If you want to help this podcast out, if you really like it, Go on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review with a positive comment. You do both at the same time, you get a special shout out on the show. Like this person, we have Bernardo Vasquez, who says, fantastic podcast with his 5-star review. He says, I'm a huge fan of Locked On Steelers. Chris is incredibly knowledgeable about football and also really talented as a host, always offering the listener great debates with an equally great array of guests. I feel like every single guest has a unique view of the Steelers, so we as listeners never feel like the content is the same. Keep up the good work, guys. Greetings from Brazil. Thank you, Bernardo, for your review. Appreciate all of our listeners and viewers from all across the world. Steeler Nation is worldwide. It is. We also will have another 5-star review to read on Monday when we come back after the weekend. We hope everyone has a great weekend. Get some chill on. Hope it's not too hot where you're at, but you get to cook out, enjoy some time, maybe hit a pool, hit a beach, something along those lines. We'll be back with you next Monday right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you then.